The question could be asked, how could something so beautiful and innocent be connected with something else so horrifying and cruel? The most basic answer is the cotton kingdom. Cotton, a crop used to produce fabrics, yarns, carpets, hosiery, blankets, and clothing, became extremely important. By 1815, after the cotton industry had spread from Virginia and the Carolinas westward in what is known as the Cotton Belt, from southern Virginia to central Texas, cotton had become the most important economic item in the South. Throughout the 1800s, cotton production produced over half the nation's exports, therefore becoming the largest contributor to the nation's economy. In an attempt to make the production faster and more efficient, slavery increased rapidly, causing what many describe as the Second Middle Passage. The North was much colder and not ideal for cotton production. Due to the fertile land and ideal land for cotton in the South, the plantation owners decided to maximize their profit. Therefore, an increase in slavery seemed most beneficial. Not only was this an economic beneficiary, but also socially. Many Southerners believed blacks were an inferior race and that keeping them as slaves would keep them from being a burden on society. The increase in cotton production went from about 700,000 bales in 1830 to about 4 million bales in 1860. This made up 3/4 of the world's supply of cotton and about 60% of the nation's. Along with this, 2 million slaves were sold in 1830, and the number doubled to 4 million in 1860. Although Eli Whitney created the cotton gin in 1793 to make the production of cotton more efficient, the need for slaves still stayed strong and progressed fast. The South's diversity became radically different than the North. At this point, 1 in 3 Southerners were black, and only 1 in 76 Northerners were black. This is mainly because the tobacco production decreased in the North, and the slaves that were in the North were transported to the South to participate in the fad of cotton. Although wage laborers, the northern version of slaves, were treated much worse than slaves in the South, the slaves in the South were stuck for life. Wage laborers could work for a little time to make the money and were freed. Meanwhile, during the harsh demand for slaves in the South during the era of the Cotton Kingdom, Southerners kept a hold of the slaves because they wanted their offsprings as well. In an attempt to keep this true, strict slave codes, especially on slave movement, were kept in legislature. Slaves had very little chance of surviving a runaway. Families were split and sold in order to meet the plantation owners' needs. In the South, by the mid-1850s, a Southern crop was far more important than human rights and equality. These characteristics of the South as a whole applied specifically to Georgia as well. By the end of the antebellum period, along with cotton production, Georgia had the second most slaves and slaveholders in the South, other than the pioneer Virginia, and was first in the lower South.